Hello.
Hi. There we are.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi. It looks like our videos aren't enabled.
Oh, I see. Duh. Why are they not enabled?
Can you sometimes if you click on our like on our boxes, you can like mute, unmute, or start our video?
Right. I see that. Make host for no, rename, put on hold, no. You know what? I'm just going to start broadcasting, right? Because it's on practice mode right now.
Great.
Okay, unmute.
Hello.
Okay. Is everyone there now?
Everyone's here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, but the video is not on yet.
Yeah.
Oh, ridiculous.
You're doing a great job. This is really complicated.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Trying to do technology is not easy.
No.
Yeah.
I could make all of you a host. Would that help?
Sure. See what happens.
Let's try that. Boom. Did that work? Did I do anything?
Host, but no video.
Oh,
yeah. We got Ingrid. Wait, it looks like Ingrid's in my house.
Should I do my background? Hold on.
Yeah, do your background.
Okay.
Wait, does Ingrid have my background? Bookshelves.
There she is. Perfect.
Okay. Gallery view. So let's see.
It looks like a bunch of people have joined, so we're just sorting out some technical glitches, and we'll get started in just a few minutes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's really weird. It was working so perfectly before.
It was.
Sorry, everyone. Just hang on.
I think you can all try to turn on the video now. Maybe that will help.
It says, when I do that, it says you can't start your video because the host has stopped it. Ingrid, I wonder if as the host you can like...
Try to do something.
If you go to participants,
Okay.
if you go to participants and then see our
Right.
the little video icon,
Right.
you can.
I think
I'm
doing
clicking on it though, and nothing happens.
Yeah, I
No,
think
but if you make everyone the host, then our video works.
yeah, I
Right.
think I just fixed it.
Yeah. Oh, you fixed it. Yeah.
Okay. We're almost there.
Yay!
Yay!
Okay, Naomi, can you hit video?
Let's see. Am I a host yet?
Yeah, I made you co-host.
Yes.
There we go.
We're all here.
All right.
Yay.
Well, that was crazy. Okay, so it's 7:02. We've got a whole bunch of people watching. Let's begin. Welcome to Litquake on Lockdown. This is a brand new virtual literary series from Litquake, San Francisco's literary festival. It begins tonight. This is the first night, and it runs every night until April 10th. All events begin at 7 p.m., and you can find the complete schedule at litquake.org. Thank you for joining us here tonight after a few glitches for fiction writing in a time of crisis. I'm Jack Bulwer from Litquake, and we usually produce a big festival every year in October. And as of this moment, that's still happening. The dates are October 8th through the 17th, and submissions are open now. But in the meantime, we wanted to create a little less loneliness in the world and kind of put people together in the literary community. And so this is for the Bay Area and California and the US and around the world. And here we are at Litquake on Lockdown. So just a few things before we begin. We want everyone to help the authors tonight by donating at litquake.org, or if you do Venmo, go to Venmo at Litquake. All proceeds are split between Litquake and all of the people here on the screen. The Bay Area is already a very precarious place to live for artists and nonprofit organizations, and things are even more difficult now. So we appreciate any support you can give. You can also support all of these authors by buying their books. You can either order them at your favorite online bookstore, or you can go to bookshop.org and they'll set you up. So let's just start. And and there will be we'll have a conversation in terms of format, and then we'll have a chance for everyone watching to ask some questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. This is the first time we've ever done this, so bear with us, and let's start. Our moderator and co-host for the evening is Lauren Markham. Lauren, take it away.
Great. Hi, everybody, and thanks so much to Jack and Litquake for having us. It's really special and sweet to come together in this way, and I appreciate this sort of on the toes work of Litquake to make this happen. And I'm totally honored to be here with these exceptional writers, these exceptional human beings, and truly extraordinary literary citizens. And I'm excited. I'm happy to facilitate this conversation that I think is really meant to be a dialogue around the kind of role of fiction at this moment in time, and how these incredible fiction writers are sort of understanding their role and sort of what work they're turning to and have turned to in times of crisis past. So I'm going to introduce them. We have R.O. Kwon. R.O. Kwon's nationally best-selling first novel, The Incendiaries, was published by Riverhead, and it has been translated into 7 languages. Named a Best Book of the Year by over 40 publications, The Incendiaries received the Housatonic Book Award and was a finalist for the National Books Critics Circle John Leonard Award for Best First Book and the Los Angeles Times First Book Prize. Kwon's writing has appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, the Paris Review, BuzzFeed, NPR, and elsewhere. Born in Seoul, Kwon has lived most of her life in the United States. Welcome. Nayomi Munaweera is the author of the novels Island of a Thousand Mirrors, which won the Commonwealth Book Prize for the Asian region in 2013, and What Lies Between Us, which won the Sri Lankan National Book Award for Best English Novel and the Godage Award. She is anthologized in Good Girls Marry Doctors, South Asian American Women on Obedience and Rebellion, What My Mother and I Don't Talk About, and All the Women in My Family Sing. And finally, Ingrid Rojas Contreras was born and raised in Bogota, Colombia. Her first novel, Fruit of the Drunken Tree, was the silver medal winner in first fiction from the California Book Awards and the New York Times Editor's Choice. Her essays and short stories have appeared in the New York Times Magazine, The Cut, BuzzFeed, and Guernica, among others. Rojas Contreras has received awards and fellowship from the Breadloaf Writers Conference, Bona, Hedgebrook, the Camargo Foundation, and the National Association of Latino Arts and Culture. She is a visiting writer at St. Mary's College and is working on a family memoir about her grandfather, a curandero from Colombia who was said to have the power to move clouds. So welcome, everybody. Really happy to be here with you all. And I just think you all are wonderful. I just wanted to make one announcement for those who are not familiar with Zoom. If you go up to the upper right-hand corner, you can kind of fiddle around with the different mechanisms for seeing people. You can sort of rearrange. So there are functions where you can see just the person who's talking or everyone all at once. So I recommend the everyone all at once version, but you can play around and to see what suits your fancy. So I wanted to start by asking you all a little bit about your writing practice and your writing life right now. Coming to the page can be hard enough as it is in what I suppose we could think of as normal times, although it sort of feels like no time is exactly normal, right? What does normal mean? I love what Mary Ruffo, the poet and essayist and thinker, says about coming to the page, like this idea of the feeling of getting to the page is like akin to the feeling of having to pee. Like you have to pee, and so you just do it. Like you just go to the page. And I really like that analogy of this sort of biological necessity. But of course it's hard to do, right? It can be really hard to do. And I think right now, I know a lot of us are struggling with that. So I'm wondering what's bringing you to the page now, what's keeping you there, what's kind of most difficult for you in getting there right now. And anyone can start, or I can call on you.
I'll start. I think that it's important to acknowledge how scary and painful and strange and uncertain the moment is. I think the operative word being uncertain. We're in this place of just having very little control or very little idea of what's going to happen and when events will unfold or what kind of timeline we're on. So I think that it's really our whole conversation is going to be about finding the balance between being very soft and gentle with yourself, right? And not pushing. I think that there's like for writers, we have such a desire for time. And here it is. Maybe, I know for folks that have kids at home, this is the time where there's no time. But it's almost like, wow, here's extra time. And now you should produce this great American novel or something. So I think there's a tremendous amount of pressure there. And then to sort of like, let yourself be a little soft and okay and come when it's calling. So I'm in the process of finishing a third book. I think of it as my psychosexual literary thriller. I'm playing with the idea of just having that be the title. I'm not really sure yet. And
I love that.
For a while, sorry?
I love that as a title.
Just for a while, I like absolutely didn't want to write and couldn't think about it and didn't want to look at it and couldn't. And then maybe about, I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago, I started again and it was really good. It's been really nice and deep and the relationship has opened again and I'm seeing all these things I can do. And I think it's really about sort of letting it come and not being too harsh with it, Yeah.
Yeah, the only in the past 3 weeks or so, basically since I started isolating in earnest, I haven't really, the only thing I've been able to substantially write is like nonfiction about not being able to write and feeling and feeling out of sorts, which isn't the kind of writing that really brings me to the page when things are going well. But I think I'm just trying to, I mean, it feels like at this point, like it feels like an accomplishment if I get through the day and like I haven't spent 7 hours reading the news, and I say that from a position of I know how lucky I am to be able to, or I know how lucky I am to be able to work from home, to be able to be right now in a position of relative safety. But I think I'm just trying to be, what Naomi said, just like try to be very easy with myself. Try to be easy with other people too, because over and over again, I find that when I'm feeling the most down, if I can think about, instead of just like sort of, I mean, sitting with that is good too, but for me at least, like it helps pick me up if I try to think about like what like, is there somebody else who I could reach out to, just like checking on how somebody else is doing? Like maybe that's a way to feel less out of sorts. And along those lines, I do find that the little bit of writing I'm able to do, so I'm trying to write like 1 sentence of fiction a day. Like that's like, if I do that, I'm like, good job, Reese, like way to go. And even that's a gesture of hope, right? Like that's believing in a future in which I'm going to care as much about my novel as I did a month ago. And I think that there's something powerful in that too, for me.
I think, I've been thinking a lot of, I don't know, because time has lost meaning. I don't know when, Reese, we talked on Google Hangouts. I don't know when that was. But you said something about like, it was like important to, but you realized that you were grieving and it was like important to like notice that this was like a grieving moment. And once you kind of like saw that there was like some space there. And I think that's true. And I've been going back and forth between, like recognizing grief and that being part of like daily experience of the things that we're losing and things we can't do. And also what you were saying, Reese, also about like making it smaller by kind of like putting into a context of like what is, you know, what is going on for everyone, and how can I help other people, and how can I be like a source of support for other people. I think even though we're talking about like how to manage your day to day, I think it all kind of feeds back into the writing in some way, because it's kind of like your whole body is an organism, and your urge to write is something that comes when everything is kind of in place and you feel balanced in some way. So I think right now is just like a very tricky building compassion for yourself, like allowing the grief to happen, and still finding joy in like your everyday. And for me, it's been, I do think it is kind of like a very hopeful gesture to write right now, and I do feel hopeful, and I have been able to write quite a bit in this time, and I think it's been growing from, I've just been cultivating a lot of small joys in my life, and I think it's grown out from just cultivating those small joys, and it just makes it possible for me to show up to the page and with a love of language.
Thanks so much. I love this idea of writing of any kind, and certainly of fiction writing as a gesture of hope towards some sort of future, however unknowable that might be. And I feel like that points to this idea that like not all writing is sitting at a computer and making sentences that comprise a book or a short story, right? And I'm interested if there are particular practices that you see yourself doing now that might feed your writing later, or practices that you have developed in the past in let's say fallow periods or times of crisis, or times where you weren't spending a lot of time like at the page, that was feeding your writing.
I do have I love looking at rocks or gems through a microscope, and this is actually my background is from it's from this. This is like blue calcite is what it's called. And so I have this microscope, and I can connect it to my computer. Yeah. So it's not technically writing when I'm looking at rocks through a microscope, but I think that there's something that is like writing. It's like I'm appreciating the structure and how things are made. Like everything has kind of like its own intelligence and its own design. And so even though it's not about writing, I am kind of like looking at it, thinking about writing. And it's a kind of writing that is just, I'm not even composing sentences in my head, but I don't know, somehow it informs how I write.
I love that. It's like just feeding you as sort of like a sentient being or an artistic being, perhaps.
Yeah. It feels like an artistic kind of like parallel interest, and I don't know, maybe someday I will just write a fiction book with point of view from like the gemstone or something. I mean, I don't know how it's gonna come out, but I do feel like it's like sometimes it feels like I'm reading a book when I'm looking this close at rocks and at gemstones.
Reese or Nayomi, anything to add?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that really, I've been thinking so much about the natural world and just our place in it, and, our connection or disconnection from it. And it's so interesting, right? Like there's never been an event like this, which on one hand connects us as a species, like just absolutely globally, like everybody is somehow affected by this. And some of us have a great deal of privilege, the fact that we have a place to like shelter and be in a place that's safe. I mean, I'm thinking about all those hundreds of thousands of people that are now leaving the major Indian cities, and there's just like you know, just it's gonna be an absolute catastrophe. So there's that, and so there's like every range of possibility, right? And meanwhile, the king of Thailand has like sequestered himself in a 5-star resort with like 20 concubines. So every sort of like human response to this moment, and yet here we are like all globally dealing with something for the first time in, I think, human history. And I read today that something like, I think it's 90% of school kids are out of school right now, which, you know, obviously has never happened before. And yet, you know, like the real question is like, what is our connection to nature? What does it mean? I think I've been thinking actually even before this for like a year or maybe more about what does it mean to tell the non-human story? Like Ingrid was talking about, what does it mean to like contend with a rock or geology or tell the story from that point of view? And I don't even know what that means, but I think it's like super important for us to think about, what is a non-human story? How do we fit into like the story of this planet? And maybe we're not the most important thing. I mean, clearly we're, you know, like I'm finding a lot of joy in the stories of animals sort of reclaiming and like just, it's kind of incredible. There was a story out of some beach in India where, you know, for I don't know how long, probably at least 20 years, tourists have been on that beach, so sea turtles cannot come and lay their eggs. And now the tourists are gone, there's something like thousands and thousands of sea turtles laying millions of eggs. And sea turtles, you know, they swim around the world and they come back to the beach where they were born to lay their eggs. So there's something like just gorgeous about that, the fact that, and then I'm thinking, wow, they've maybe been wanting to come and lay their eggs on this beach and they couldn't. And now they can. And so I don't know what all of this means, but I think like as writers, the questions need to be expanded or enlarged or, and I don't just mean like in terms of like sci-fi, speculative or any of that. I just mean like almost like a spiritual contending with the planet or something. I don't know what any of that means, but those are the thoughts that I'm sort of grappling with.
I love that. And I feel like I'm so curious to hear what Reese thinks. And I'm also just want to note that we're talking about like looking beyond the human experience and the human kind of sentient consciousness as like, as sort of like inspiration, a sense of connection and source material, which I think is like a really interesting premise for fiction. I don't know if you have anything to add, Reese, no pressure.
I think I've been a little slow to jump in on this because honestly, I've like barely been able to read on top of barely being able to write, which is so weird, you know, when the words, when you can't even read, that's such a strange feeling. But I've been realizing that I've just been like, whenever at this point, when I have like an urge or a craving, I'm just like giving it to myself, as long as it's not harmful to somebody else, as long as it's not like, I don't know, as long as it's not hurting anyone else, I'm just giving it to myself. And so whatever that might mean, I don't know. I got an electric massager because I was feeling, and it just, and like, I think like, you know, like, I think it's, I just keep trying to like understand that like a lot of this is, I mean, of course, like my body is so upset and it is so hard to work. It's so hard to rest. It's so hard to be a human when your body is in a state like, what comes next? And like, it's alarmed. And so I'm just trying to be more gentle with the body of myself in this time. Yeah.
Which is like, yeah, go ahead, Naomi.
Oh, no, I didn't have anything.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that speaks to, right, like we're sort of nurturing and caring for like all these aspects of ourselves and trying to connect to like all of these different realms such that, you know, we survive and we stay intact, and also that we might have something, you know, to offer on the page whenever that comes. And Reese, you mentioned, you know, the challenge of writing. I wanted to sort of transition to, the challenge of writing and reading right now. And I'm also finding that there's certain things that I have a really difficult time reading and other things that I'm sort of gobbling up. And I'm curious if you all have anything to share about or would care to share, like crises, either personal crises or sort of societal crises that were not this moment. Like you can kind of think back and think about fictional works that really served you or supported you. I mean, I think a lot of us do, you know, or have had the experience of turning to fictional works in times of crisis, again, personal or societal. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit and sort of maybe have us lift up some examples or some recollections of books or stories that have really meant something to us at particular moments of time, and sort of why you think that is.
I'll take it. I think, I mean, most of us come to writing through books, right? I think like it's usually the kid that's like obsessed with books and is reading and really like living within books that becomes a writer. And I think like for me, I don't want to talk for the other writers, but for me, I think early reading was a sort of like almost disassociative. How do I get the fuck out of here? Oh, I can do it through books. And in a certain same way that writing has become a solace and a sort of like can be a disassociative state, it's like, you know, the way out is through the word. So the earliest book I was very, very obsessed with is a British book that I don't think many Americans know. It's called My Family and Other Animals by Gerald Durrell, who is the brother of Lawrence Durrell, who of course is the novelist. But Gerald Durrell was a naturalist who grew up in Corfu during the Second World War, and he wrote this like book about his childhood in Corfu, and it was just like idyllic and gorgeous and full of animals. And I was a little kid growing up in Nigeria, even though we were from Sri Lanka, but I like lived in that book and read it over and over again. So, and just there's so much of it that has like permeated me and like lives in my body, which I almost didn't realize until about when my first book came out. I found a copy and I read it again, and I'm like, oh my God. So like there are almost like whole images that are coming through my writing that I have like absorbed. And so that's a book I return to when things are really painful, and I almost don't have to read it chronologically. It's just like imagery and texture and tone and like really beautiful like language. And I find a lot of solace in that book. And then I'm sure there's others, but that's the one that I usually return to.
Thank you.
Odd. I mean, I guess it's not odd, but I've been able to really read poetry. That's the one. That's like the one that feels left. It's like every disastrous article possible plus like bits of poetry. I think there's something just like really lovely right now about the ways in which, I mean, of course, like poetry has narrative to it, of course, but it's not like sort of like the relentless march forward of I think there's something about being freed from narrative like that feels really good. So that might be one suggestion. If prose isn't working for you right now, then the poets always have us, or like we always have the poets rather.
Yeah.
They have our
yeah. I also just want to say, like, I think there's something like deeply embodied about poetry, and of course there is about fiction too, but there are sort of like plot points that there's sometimes mechanical things that have to happen, right, in narrative. And I think all of us, based on what we were chatting about earlier, have been turning to poetry. So I think that's really beautiful.
Well, that's really funny, because I wonder if the poets are all turning to novels. That would be interesting.
Poets. Reading novels. Or just like everyone's going to poetry.
Right.
How about you, Ingrid?
I've been, like in the past, MFK Fisher's The Art of Eating, which is like the collection of her whole writing on eating. It just, I've been vegetarian for a long time, but her writing on like cooking meat and eating meat just gives me so much joy. Like it's just the way that and maybe it's something about what you were saying about embodiment and writing that kind of like really transports you and just puts you in your body in a way without narrative. So that collection for me has before kind of like given me a refuge. And there's one piece of writing, one piece in that collection that just like is seared into my brain. But it's, you know, after the just reading after, you know, about all the different foods that she loves and like how much she puts into each of her dinners. There's this one essay where she talks about the most kind of amazing food experience that she's had, and it was in Paris, and there was an old orange that it was like getting older, and so it was just like the smell was in the air. She peeled it, and then she took orange wedges and put it on top of the radiator. So just like warming it a little bit and then eating it. And so it's just like so unexpected. And I found that to be such a beautiful moment and such a beautiful like communion with food. But I always think of her. That's such a it's a great book. Yeah, especially if you want to have something that like really puts you in your body. But it's also not like narrative driven. That's been amazing for me before in the past.
This makes me wonder if like I feel like since many of us are sort of naming that narrative is sort of complicated right now, I wonder if that has something to do with the fact that like, I mean, not that I think most of us know how our stories, our fiction is going to end, but like we don't even know what's like around the bend tomorrow. Like I'm wondering if there's actually something destabilizing about I wonder what you all think about that idea, that there's something like maybe a little bit destabilizing about like more traditional narrative right now because there's like so much unknown in like our every moment and every day. Or maybe not.
I mean, that would make sense to me. There is, yeah, like, you know, luckily what I'm working on is in the past, so I don't have to wonder about the people in my book and like how they feel about right now. But I do think it's kind of like when you're writing and then there's like a huge shift, then it creates this spike in the plot where there's like suddenly a before and an after. And so I think for when you're thinking of narrative and you're trying to construct a narrative right now, I think that can be very difficult because you just don't know how it's going to turn out. You don't know what the context of the before is going to be, since we don't know what the after is going to be. So I do think that there's something that maybe that is why I do tend to try or find solace right now in non-narrative work.
That's a good transition to a question that I wanted to ask, which is sort of like around grappling with questions of relevancy, whether we're writing or just thinking about what we were working on. I think a lot of writers and I think a lot of art makers are sort of fumbling and struggling with the question of relevancy. Like, wait, how is what how is what I'm working on or what I conceived of as my project relevant to right now, given all of these unknowns? And Nayomi posted something really beautiful the other day that I've been thinking about kind of nonstop, which was like, I get why it's so, if it's okay that I share. Okay. Like I finally figured out one of the reasons it's so hard to write right now. My characters have never heard of coronavirus. Like, and I sort of think that that's both hilarious and like super profound. Like, it's like, you have this like really critical information about the world that like your characters, if you have not timestamped them in the now, don't know about, or like you have not given them the information yet. And so I'm kind of curious if anyone here is grappling with questions of relevancy, or if like your conception of like what you want to write, whether you're doing it now or some like sort of future thing that you're going to be working on, has shifted at all.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, when I said when I wrote that post, I was saying it's so strange because I'm working on this book with these characters and it's the near past, right? It just happened. But now I have this like crazy information, as you said, Lauren, about the world. And they don't know, my characters don't know it. I know it, and my readers know it, right?
Right.
So the world's different. I think I'm going to have to infuse some of this in there just because the reader will know. And I don't know what that means. And it's really interesting because my book is like relatively, it's closer to done. I'm, doing another rewrite, and then probably another one, and then another one, because that's just how it goes. But, like it's in 5 parts, and the plan for right now is to write the ending, which I absolutely know what the ending is. And I've known the whole time. I've known for like 3 or 4 years or whatever I've been writing. And I just absolutely cannot even enter the end, maybe because I don't know like what's going to happen to all of us. So it's weird. It's like the end is this locked room. It's a small part. It's not even like a lot. I mean, I don't know. I think it should be like 5 to 10 pages. It should be quick, and it's a lot of plot. I have no idea how to go in there. So it's really quite complicated. And I had another thought, which I've forgotten now. So anyway.
We can come back to you.
Yeah, I've been trying to, I've been realizing, because my novel is also the novel I'm working on right now, it's also set sort of like in the like near past. So in theory, this shouldn't affect anything, but going along with what y'all were saying, I think I realized like, I don't know, I think now I'm uncertain about like the perspective from which this story is being told. And so, yeah, like what does my narrator know about the world? Are we post or pre 2020? And so I think that is something that's on my mind. But I think I'm also, I want to say this very carefully. There's, I'm like so allergic to sort of like silver lining point of view. Like, hey, like this helped me realize this world catastrophe helped me realize a thing for myself. How lovely. So that's not what I want to do. But I think there is a central question of mine in general with my fiction has always been the idea of like writing for people who don't have a lot of time left, like the idea of like not wanting to write something that like matters to me, because if I'm going to ask for people's time and attention by writing a thing and like putting in the world and asking people to read it, I want it to feel really urgent. I want it to feel like something I really absolutely had to say. And I think I feel that urgency even more now. Like I always did. It was always a central part of how I thought about writing, but it's really hard not to feel that now. And so it's cutting away some with my 1 sentence a day, like like I feel as though like I really am engaging with the work, and I'm still caring for it, and it's still there, even if I can't really like do much with it right now.
There are many days I go not writing even a sentence. I'm impressed. I don't know. I always feel like any time we're like engaging with the work, even if it's just reading, maybe this is just a story I tell myself, but I'm always like, I don't know. I think that's really beautiful.
I was just going to add, I remembered the thought. I think it's really interesting what people are going to want after this moment, right? I think it's interesting watching what people are like watching on Netflix or reading. It's like, I think that there's going to be a great need to look at pandemic movies and read pandemic books and read all of that. And I think there's going to be a great need to also not.
Yes.
And absolutely not engage with that and think about completely different things. So like whatever you're working on, and this is like for you guys that are listening, is like, it doesn't necessarily have to contend with this. And if it does, awesome, that's great. There will be an audience for that too. But, I don't know if you necessarily need the pressure. Suddenly it feels like a lot of people are writing like love in the time of coronavirus, and yes and no, right? Like we do need that, and maybe we also need like lots of other things. So if that's not your project, that's fine. It will, hopefully we will have readers, right? Hopefully we'll be around to write, and hopefully there will be readers. So yeah, we shall see.
Ingrid, did you have anything to add?
I'm working on a memoir now, and as I said, like it happens before in the past, so I don't have to worry about right now. I do think, after, my novel is about the 90s in Colombia. Mm-hmm. And I was just kind of like always wondering how the book would speak to the present in Colombia, and didn't think that it would, honestly. I thought that I was just kind of like writing a very specific story that was kind of frozen in time. Mm-hmm. But I, just in my experience of having the book come out, and even though we were at a different historical point in Colombian politics, it does feel like that, history is connected. And so anything that, that story, even though it happened in the 90s, had some connective tissue that informs the present of what the country was living at the time. So I think that it's not even, so part of me wants to say, like, because it's all connected, it's going to inform whatever moment it's published in ways that you can't imagine. Because that's kind of like what I saw and what I experienced with my own book.
I love that. And I feel like I've been thinking a lot about how, like, we're not necessarily writing for the present, right? Like perhaps we're writing toward, like, to some future audience, and potentially like this, which is especially right now, like, but it always is, like, these unknowable people in the future. And if we think of like a book and a work of art, which I do, and I certainly see all of your beautiful books and everything you write this way, is like, as sort of like an offering and like an act of generosity and like love, even if tough love, right, toward readers and toward the future. I think it's really beautiful to think about, like, okay, maybe in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, like, we don't actually all want to be reading pandemic books, right? Like, just like after every catastrophe, we haven't only wanted art, right, that is about that thing. And as a journalist, I always think about the sort of like very sad tendency of journalism to be like, okay, now we all have to write a family separation story. Oh God, now we have to write a, whatever, Bernie Sanders story. We have to, and I'm thinking about that now, like, there's so much amazing coronavirus journalism happening, but like, I worry about all the untold stories, and I think about that with fiction too, right? Like the goal here is not to just like now write only about this one reality or this one moment in time. I want to move to questions in a few minutes, but I thought we wanted to make sure we talked explicitly about joy. And some people have shared a little bit about joy already, but I'm wondering, like, where you are finding joy, where you're sourcing joy, and how you might feel as though that joy is either serving you now as a writer or as a reader, or might serve you in the future. And like, any joy tips. This is a time also to share tips for joy.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like, in terrible moments, I feel that we're in this horrible hole, and I feel my anxiety, and I feel I can really swirl into it and be very afraid for myself and for everyone around me and all of that. And then in my most hopeful moments, I really think that maybe this is some sort of portal into some other way of being that we haven't quite understood or figured out, but maybe collectively, in my most hopeful moments, of course, maybe this is like the birth process for us. And the birth process is painful, right? Like, you're gonna get squeezed, it's gonna be super painful. But I am, in those good moments, I hold on to maybe this is our birthing. And that brings me some quiet joy. There's that. And then on a really practical level, I've been fostering cats. So the shelters have all closed, which means, because the animal people have to go and shelter in place also. So I went to I called the shelter and said, give me a cat. And they gave me a cat. And he's been with me for 10 days. And he actually left today. He gave me like some pretty good scratches before he left. But apparently there's another one coming in a couple of days. And that's felt like very sweet. I'm like, I'm sheltering in place. And so it's this little guy who, has no idea what's going on. But, we're like sheltering together. So that's been really sweet and joyful.
Nice.
Lauren, you and I were at Bread Love together, and we were hiking one day, and I just found this, like, I saw this glittery rock in the path.
The story, by the way, I think about every day, so I'm so glad you're sharing it.
So I picked it up, and then I was holding it in my hand, and we were hiking into the pond, whatever it is. And when we got there, I opened my palm, and the kind of like glitter from the rock had transferred to my palm. And then I was like, you guys, if we if we like find this rock and just like rub it on ourselves, like we will have body glitter. And it was just, I told you, like, if the apocalypse ever happened, that would be on glitter duty.
Yes.
And I think that's just what's happening.
You're on like metaphoric glitter duty?
No, I like literally I am on glitter. Like there's glitter all over the place. I just found, I mean, I'm talking about like small joys, but I have this, there's like apparently like a eyelid glitter glue that just goes on clear on your eyelid, and then you can just take whatever glitter you have and then just put it on. And it's so amazing. So I kind of feel like, you know, if you are wearing glitter on your eyelids, you're doing well. Like no matter what is going on like around, it's like it just gives me so much joy. So yeah, so that I'm just on glitter duty and sheltering in place.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I'm really allergic to cheese, is a thing I realized a few years ago. And so, but a year ago, my life got a little better in that respect. And then I realized if I take like a 7-pill combination of antihistamines and other just like basic, like, you know, whatever, it's not a big deal. But I shouldn't do it that often in theory. And I just break out in horrible hives if I have cheese. And it's super sad because it's my favorite food. And so I have committed to eating cheese as often as I want, as long as I'm isolated, as long as I can get as much cheese as I can get, and whenever I want it, I'm just gonna have cheese. I don't care anymore. So that's giving me a great deal of joy because that's not something I've had for years.
I love that. I'm so happy to hear all these ways that you all are sustaining yourselves.
Wait, Reese, what's your favorite cheese?
Oh, great question.
Well, there's no
favorite.
It's like every cheese I encounter in that moment, it's my favorite cheese. This is the closest window I've ever had into like a true womanizer's point of view. You know, like the I'm in love every time. You don't understand. Like the ones who are like not misogynist, just like really love. Anyway, I love all the cheeses. When it comes down to it, I'll even have like a craft single. Like I just like any cheese.
This is such a good thing to know about you.
Wait, what about you, Lauren? Where are you finding joy?
Oh, I have been finding joy. Okay, so I have this, I'm right now, you can't see it because I'm in this like, I have a thistle background, but we built a little like unpermitted writer's hut in the backyard where that is my office, and I've been spending every day there, and every day at about 4 o'clock a hummingbird comes to feed from the little and I just feel like I get to have this moment with a hummingbird every day, which is like such a privilege on so many like the levels of privilege here are like off the charts, but just this like moment of seeing kind of like what you're saying about the cats, Naomi, like this being that is like fundamentally okay, you know. And I've been thinking a lot about how like the world is always on fire, it's just on fire all at the same time everywhere right now in like this colossal way, and so those like moments of presence are really beautiful for me. Okay, we have to take questions, but I actually did want to just ask one. I wanted to make sure I asked a craft question and I almost forgot. So I wanted to ask if there's anything like on the level of craft that you're finding yourself, whether it's with that one sentence or with something that you're reading or like the work that you're doing, like is there a craft tick that you're finding yourself like engaging in, or sort of like has your craft shifted at all, or are you writing the same kind of sentence? Like I, for example, keep writing these very long, like languid, kind of like insufferably long passages about the natural world, which I feel like is just like a craving, you know. But you probably have not insufferable craft. I'm curious if there's anything that you're noticing about your kind of craft or the kinds of ways that you're putting words together.
what Reese said earlier about feeling the urgency and feeling like there's no time, I have felt on a craft level in my sentences. I feel like I'm writing much shorter sentences, and when they grow long, I have this feeling of being like, what are you doing? There is no time. So I do feel some like, yeah, it is different, and it comes from an urgency, like no time feeling.
Okay. Anything to add, Reese or Naomi? No.
Now, I will add this. It's completely unrelated to your question and has nothing to do with writing at all, but maybe it has everything to do with writing. And maybe this is not the moment for people to figure this out or whatever, but I've been, I've meditated for a really long time. That's been a huge part of my life for like 20 years. And if there's anything that will like really help you get through this moment, meditation's the deal. Because it's really about cultivating, just like sitting in place and like being like, okay, I just have absolutely no control, and let me see how fucked up and crazy my body is on the inside and feel it and be okay with it. So I would just sort of I would say to all of you guys, think about it. A lot of meditation programs, pretty much like everyone is now online. So if you can find a teacher that you connect with, and find a community, there's tons of them. I don't know, it's been absolutely the most helpful thing that I think will help get us through this moment. Yeah.
Thank you, Naomi.
Yeah.
This is far less profound, but I've just been finding myself longing to write like party scenes, and like my characters were like I was working, like they were in a bar, and then I was just like, no, I want more festivities. And so like I like moved, I already had the scene, but I was like, I'm gonna work on the wedding scene. Like I want dancing, I want like
Oh my God.
And so it's been like a good piece to put that kind of like longing. Yeah.
Reese and I were at a party right before all of this went down, and now it feels like 35 years ago, where we were at this like crazy crowded party with like people everywhere. That just feels like such a different life now. It was like maybe a month ago.
Unimaginable.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to transition to questions now. So if you are on Zoom, you can go to the bottom of your screen, and there's a little button at the sort of like bottom nav bar that says Q&A, and you can click that and put something in the Q&A. And Naomi has a question, which is, what is the name of the book about food? Ingrid, what was the name of that book?
It's called The Art of Eating by M.F.K. Fisher.
Great. So anyone else have any questions? And in the meantime, I'm going to still ask you guys to share the last thing before we go. I sort of thought we could close with that. In the meantime, if anyone else has questions while we're waiting for folks to kind of queue their online questions up, if you guys have questions, or I can ask more questions. Oh, I feel like we're getting questions, but it's not. Oh, great. Well, if no questions are coming in and we don't have any questions for each other, I could ask us to sort of share our final, oh wait, any readings you'd like to share? Oh yes, there are. Emily, questioner Emily said, any readings you'd like to share? That is the perfect segue to our closing, which is, I wanted to ask all of these lovely writers to share share something that's bringing them solace, or recently, or has sort of served as a beacon in these bleak times. And so yeah, that's what's going to happen now. Ingrid, it looks like you have your book. Do you want to start and share what you're reading?
You can see me.
What's that?
I said, oh my God, you can see me.
Yeah, I can see you. You are in your house, but I can see
you. So I was reading Natalie Diaz's, you can see it, Post-Colonial Love poem, right before, and continued reading it right as we were all getting into the quarantine. And there's this beautiful poem in the collection that's in the back that's called Beef Work. And when I read it, it meant so much to me because it's even just the first line. Grief work. Why not now go toward the things I love? I have walked slow in the garden of her, gazed the black flower dilating her animal eye. I give up my sorrows the way a bull gives its horns, astonished, and wishing there is rest in the body's softest parts. Like Jacob's angel, I touched the garnet of her hip, and she knew my name, and I knew hers. It was Auxochromo, it was Chromophoro, it was Eliza. When the eyes and lips are brushed with honey, what is seen and said will never be the same. So why not take the apple in your mouth, in flames and pieces, straight from the knife's sharp edge? Achilles chased Hector around the walls of Ilium 3 times. How long must I circle the high gate between her hip and knee to solve the red gold geometry of her thigh? Again, the gods put their large hands in me, move me, break my heart, like a clay jug of wine, loosen a beast from some dark long depth. My melancholy is hoofed. I, the terrible, beautiful, Lankan, a shining devour horse tethered at the bronze manger of her collarbones. I do my grief work with her body, labor to make the emerald tigers in her throat leap. Lead them burning green to drink from the deep violet jetting her breast. We go where there is love, to the river on our knees beneath the sweet water. I pull her under 4 times until we are rivered, we are rearranged. I wash the silk and silt of her from my hands. Now who I come to, I come clean to, I come good to.
Thank you, Ingrid and Natalie Diaz. Reese, you want to go next?
Yeah. Okay, so mine is it's by Nicole Seeley, and it's called Object Permanence. Okay, Nicole Seeley, Object Permanence for John. We wake as if surprised the other is still there, each petting the sheet to be sure. How have we managed our way to this bed, beholden to heat like dawn indebted to light? Though we're not so self-important as to think everything has led to this, everything has led to this. There's a name for the animal love makes of us, named, I think, like rain, for the sound it makes. You are the animal after whom other animals are named. Until there's none left to laugh, days will start with the same startle and end with caterpillars gorged on milkweed. Oh, how we entertain the angels with our brief animation. Oh, how I'll miss you when we're dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we definitely have a common theme, which is interesting because we didn't plan that.
Yeah.
Mine's very short, but mine's by Rilke, and it's called What Survives. What survives? Who says that all must vanish? Who knows? Perhaps the flight of the bird you wound remains, and perhaps flowers survive, caresses in us in their ground. It isn't the gesture that lost, but it dresses you again in gold armor, from breast to knees, and the battle was so pure, an angel wears it up for you.
Thank you.
So many angels, you guys.
So many angels. Any last thoughts before we close that anyone wants to name or mention? Or okay.
I'll say something. Just be soft with yourselves. I was also thinking about reading the Mary Oliver poem, where she says, "Let the soft animal of your body be the soft animal," and I think that's really important. Be soft with yourself. Be soft with other people. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, here's to writing in all of its forms. Here's to this moment as a chance to sort of go inward and embody, for self-protection, but also hopefully toward a world that's hopefully at one point less on fire, and also toward really beautiful and literature that serves and feeds us all. I really encourage everyone in the audience to buy these wonderful individuals' books. All of you have written things that have served and sustained me, and I appreciate you all for that. I appreciate everyone for coming tonight, and thank you for Litquake for making this happen for us, for kind of creating this virtual space kind of on the fly really quickly. So thank you to everybody. Thanks, and be well, be safe, take care of yourself, go easy on yourself, and read books or poems or whatever you can when you can.
Bye, you guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks.